Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Hope you enjoy. One to Chop the Forest Down, written by Wilty Wonka. Space is an odd dichotomy. On the surface of a planet, you might think it's incredibly empty. A void, save one hydrogen per cubic meter or so. You might look up and say, there's nothing there, and look down and say, the world is here, as matter presses against you. And you wouldn't be wrong, not really. But then you would leave the surface, and like every other being before you, an epiphany would strike you. As you leave the planet, the matter that's around you, the world, the perception undergoes a shift best described as religious. Everything you know, everything you've ever touched, felt, seen, every particle you've ever interacted with shifts from being the world to an exponentially shrinking blurb upon a vast canvas. Canvas, you realize, is in fact the world of which you have been ignorant. Down there is nothing, a speck. Up here, in the void, is everything. The iron cathedral betrayed no sound. Beyond its cold walls, a mesmerizing symphony played. It was a billion strong. The dancing waves of energy and countless stars weave through and around each other in a profound display. An indescribable amount of time passed. The iron cathedral betrayed no sound. Beyond its cold walls, a mesmerizing symphony played. It was 1 trillion strong. The dancing waves of energy from countless galaxies wove themselves into a small patch of the tapestry that is the universe. An indescribable amount of time passed. The iron cathedral betrayed a single sound. It was a tiny hum, like a distant bumblebee, and yet it pierced through the ancient emptiness like a lance. The source of the hum began a gigantic black cylinder. It was a radioisotope thermoelectric generator. The radioactive isotope that was within had depleted to a critical level. It had sent a signal to the auxiliary fusion generator 54, which, when spun up, in turn sent power to pod M32798. The first image his brain processed in several eons was a reflection of his own face. At first, this image had no meaning. For a moment that stretched, however long, he existed between worlds as a blank, unimprinted consciousness that floated through the cosmos like a balloon that didn't exist. And then, when enough neurons arose from the deep cold, it clicked. He recognized himself. A human. So much more. Doverin blinked, then coughed, then grimaced as he felt the thousands of nerves protest the new warmth that entered his body. Just then, 2 needles pierced his thighs. They delivered a much-needed cocktail of painkillers, anti-nausea drugs, and stimulants. As the drugs worked their magic, Doverin felt his cryogenic-induced amnesia fade like a fog being burned away by the sun. His memory returned in a fragmented way, and he recalled certain things in flashes, like a reel being played behind his eyes. His mother opened a ration pack, a half-finished game of chess, their set covered in grit. The lesser, a brown sunset, light dancing off the waters of the hydroponics bay. The mild terror of his first surface-to-orbit flight. Patches of grass surrounding long dead tree. A steel and stone behemoth floating in the stars. 6.62 times 10 to the power of negative 34. Sand, upon sand, upon sand, upon sand. I am a technician on the life ship Phoebe. Blink. I am a technician of the life ship Phoebe, he said to no one. And quite literally, to no one. He was confused as to why he said it. Then it came back to him. It was the mantra drilled into him during his training. The mantra served one purpose, to remind him, in this instant, of his responsibility. The responsibility for the human race. Like a computer, the human mind can be programmed. As he uttered the mantra, every skill he required came flooding back to him like bits of code being fetched. As the notion formed a whole, he hit the release on his pod. The explosive hiss echoed throughout the vast chamber, the sound bouncing off countless rows of pods, ascending and descending into darkness. Doverin frowned. Only a single light above his pod illuminated the vast chamber. Thinking for a moment, he used the training that had just come back to him. Attached to the M-pod was a technician datapad. He reached out and grabbed it, manipulating it. He checked to see if he had the permissions. He did. With a flick of the pad, the chamber was instantly illuminated with thousands of lights. Ah, better. To his right and left along the wall stretched a row of pods, about 50 or so, making a ring that met on the other side of the cylindrical chamber. Looking across, he could see this was only one of a multitude of levels that sat like circular balconies. A railing was situated on the edge of the level he was on, separating him from the opened interior. Bracing himself against the railing, he looked down. If he wasn't pumped full of anti-nausea drugs, he probably would have thrown up. The chamber spread downwards for several kilometers, and the bottom was a tiny dot. "Don't fall, Toverin," he said to himself. "Don't you fall." Backing quickly away from the railing, he took another look at the datapad. Here he could see his task. RT reactor generator 1A has depleted itself of its fuel. Synthesize corresponding radioisotope and replace. "That's simple, huh?" he said to the datapad. "Yes," it said back. Toverin laughed, the sound echoing. "Of course," he said. "Bastard," and thumbed the mute button. He was a man who enjoyed his solitude. And here, it was the purest humanity had ever created, not to be tarnished by an AI. Toverin pocketed the datapad and began walking along the railing, but not too close. As he walked, his footfalls boomed against the metal of the pod balcony and echoed throughout the chamber as if he was within a gigantic metal drum. The air tasted metallic, like a nosebleed. Passing by pods, he looked through some of them. The occupants showed various signs of aging. Most were his age, fresh. Others were more withered. "Wonder what kept you awake," he said to one of them. They didn't respond. Eventually Toverin reached the short hallway leading outwards from the chamber. It ended in a small room containing a large vertical pipe. This was the pneumatic tube system that would transport him to his destination. A small hatch led into the pipe. Pressing a button, he opened the hatch and crawled past it into the waiting tube. As he crawled into the tiny vehicle, he couldn't help but remember something he learned about one of the ancient wars. Men of some long-forgotten nation had climbed into metal tubes and launched themselves at their enemy. Rather than rely on the basic trajectory, they themselves steered the warhead designed to destroy the sea ships of their enemy. They streaked through the water where their only end was death. One last act. He inwardly shuddered. Not only was it too similar to the personal transport, the idea too closely matched Phoebe itself. A metal thing carrying men streaking upon a vast ocean. Those within driven to desperate action, hoping that it would mean something. The tube accelerated, slowly bringing him up to 0.5 kilometers per second. As he moved towards the center of the once moon, he felt the force pushing him back into his seat, lessen slightly. It was the spin gravity fading away. For a number of seconds, the acceleration stopped, leaving him coasting at a speed great enough for his body alone to punch through several decks. Then his seat flipped, and he decelerated to a stop. Climbing out of the tube, he was greeted with some supreme pinnacle of human engineering, the heavy fusion matrix. Here in the core of Phoebe, a vast spherical chamber had been hollowed out. It stretched 10 kilometers in diameter. Across the surface of the interior, a massive lattice of steel and plastic laid, as if a giant circuit had been set into the stone. The circuit converged at 2 points, on opposite sides of the chamber, where the chamber rose out towards the direct center of the chamber. Attached to those columns lay the very heart of Phoebe, a giant sphere, a kilometer across, inset with countless facilities across its surface, each representing more math and physics than Toverin could fit in his head. Thankfully, he didn't have to fit it into his head. He walked over to a terminal, input his ID, and turned a lever. First came the fission generators, housed in blocky facilities all across the station. They drew their spin-up power directly from a series of passive radioisotope thermometric generators, one of which Toverin was awakened to refuel. They filled the chamber with a wine of turbines. Next came the basic generators. These were housed in neat pentagons. Drawing from power of the fusion generators, they started a specific sequence of their own. They filled the chamber with the hum of electromagnetics. Then came the servers, housed in facilities up to 2 stories tall. They dotted the inverted landscape of the chamber. They would perform an indescribable amount of calculations necessary to the matrix. They filled the chamber with the whistle of ventilation. Altogether they formed an eerie symphony. The chamber sung to Toverin. After a minute, the server showed booted status. All was ready. He entered his ID again into the terminal and put his hand on another lever. "What are you doing here?" The chamber spoke to Toverin. He blinked, perhaps an errant subconscious thought wrestled to his consciousness. "I'm a technician of the life ship Phoebe," he thought to himself, and shifted the lever. A roar filled the chamber. 2 massive linear particle accelerators that extended from the chamber all the way to the surface of the once moon sprung to life. Hydrogen, fed at the surface, accelerated to near the speed of light along 100 kilometers of accelerated track from both ends of Phoebe. The opposite streams of matter, each possessing more kinetic energy per second than most humans generate in a lifetime, collided with the matrix in a spectacular fashion. The pure energy release could be enough to crack the once moon in half, and would, if not for the incredibly strong electromagnetic field generated by the matrix. A hole in the field the size of a pinhead would be enough to let the whole thing burst like a balloon. The wave of pressure generated within was bounced off the electromagnetics and refocused towards the center of the matrix. There, the wave created a point of pressure so high the matter within collapsed in on itself. Hydrogen molecules were smashed into each other with such a density that they fused into heavier elements. The heavy fusion matrix, essentially, is a man-made mini-supernova. It is the first of its kind, and without it, would make the voyage of the life ship Phoebe impossible. The matrix as such was like a crockpot, if a crockpot had required the cutting-edge theoretical physics. You throw stuff in, and the final product is greater than the sum of its parts. Not in terms of mass, of course, but substance, water to wine. Toverin checked the spectrum analysis on the terminal. The crockpot was done. Turning the lever again, he shut down the contained supernova. The streams of matter were cut, and the particle accelerators now acted as vents for the incredible amount of heat energy within the matrix to radiate into space. The roar dulled, and the eerie symphony returned to the chamber. "Your understanding is to be lauded. Human, yet puny." Toverin froze. It wasn't a voice, not really. The constant noise from the chamber had warped and stretched from the words. He looked up, instinctively searching for the source that didn't exist. The kilometers across interior stretched before him, just as before. "Quats! I am not there, human. I am here." Toverin just stared blankly upwards. An incredible urge to run suddenly filled his body with tension. But his lizard brain was having a hard time determining where. "Speak, human! I have not spoken in such a very long time." Toverin twitched, still frozen in place. Eventually he spoke aloud. "You're, not supposed to happen," he said, lamely. "Quats! Neither you, human, yet here we are. Now I say again, why are you here? In the length between the matter, that is your home." Toverin unfroze, suddenly weak. He shot out an arm to brace himself against the terminal. So soon, he thought. It wasn't supposed to happen this soon. He looked back over at the terminal. A couple of inputs later, and he was at the command to wake the captain. He initiated the command. Nothing happened. "Quats! The human knows not his worth. Speak now for your race. Why are you here?" Toverin blinked. There was nothing else for him to do but answer. "We flee from the dark forest." A long moment passed. "What forest?" Toverin took time to think about this. How do you explain something to a god? Eventually, he began, shakily at first, but quickly his words gained momentum. "For a long time we thought that we were alone. Our race, a miracle spawned upon a rock by sheer chance alone. A toddler with no brother or sister, or even an enemy to provide us company. and we cried out, "Hello, is anyone there?" again and again. But there was no answer, only silence. So we lived on. We conquered our little rock, and then the next one after that. Eventually we grew to accept the solitude of the universe. We had our rocks, and we had ourselves, and that, it seemed, was enough. We bore our loneliness and ceased our cries. And it was like this for a time. Then one of our rocks was shattered, hit by a planetoid moving at a fraction of the speed of light. Unfortunate, we said. Sheer chance. After all, weren't we just that? But then another misfortune happened, and another, until we were left with just the dusty with the rock we came from. How could this have happened to us, we said, saddened and confused, until we realized the terrible truth of our galaxy. Our cries were unanswered, not because there were none to answer them, but because there was none so stupid to have done so. There was only one possibility left. Our galaxy was like a dark forest, filled with silent hunters. They hunt not to devour, but because they have to, for their prey could destroy them just as easily as they had been destroyed. And so you see, we flee this forest in search of a city. Tovrin finished and exhaled sharply. The monologue was rare for him. He was usually a quiet man, but it had distracted him from the cold pit of dread that had gathered in his belly. He sat, awaiting the deity that seemed to live in the fabric of the universe itself. "You seem certain to find the city." Tovrin frowned at this. He thought back to the men in the tubes. Those men had lost that ancient war. Perhaps all we'll find is another forest, but that possibility is not enough to stop us. Not enough! That's such an odd one, human, to stake your survival on a possibility. Time has proven us experts in that. Doomed! Indefatigable, stupid, uncompromising. The deity was silent at this. "You speak well for your race, human." Tovrin glanced up towards the chamber, surprised. "I could scatter your race like stardust." As he heard this, Tovrin heard the chamber take on a sickly whine. A deep groan echoed, and he looked up to see the heavy fusion matrix evaporate before his eyes. He raised his arms to shield his face, futilely. This was how the human race ended, he thought. Squashed like a bug, long overdue, delayed only by several meaningless eons, bought by cryostasis. But there came no wave of nova heat, of supercharged particles. He lowered his arm and saw a brilliant halo ring of heavy metals and hydrogen around a cracked core, merely hanging there, shimmering. "Yet you refute me." As he watched, the halo collapsed inwards and the matrix reformed like a glass unshattering itself. "You remind me of myself, a very long time ago." Tovrin, struck silent, only stared at the matrix as if it was the deity itself. "Heed this well, humanity, for there are none to tell me this, when I was but a single race like you. You'll find no gleaming city, no collection of races such as yourself, for you are no ordinary race." Tovrin listened, shocked yet rapt. "You'll find nothing but forests, dark and without light, filled with intelligence, yet dead. You'll find no gleaming city, no. You must build that yourself, for you are the only one who will dare to do so." Tovrin opened his mouth to speak, but the words froze in his throat as the chamber blinked before him. The Iron Cathedral was not quiet. Beyond the superheated vents, a mesmerizing symphony played. It was 1 billion strong. The dancing waves of energy from countless alien stars danced on its surface. Yet these were not alone. A pattern emerged out of the waves. Tovrin felt as if he was splashed with cold, invisible water. The chamber that he was in was the same as it was a second before, yet it was different. Something had changed. A constant beeping from the terminal brought him out of his stupor, and he shifted himself over to see what it was. A transmission. He thought that he couldn't be shocked any more than he was already. But he was. He opened it. "Unknown vessel, cease your movement. If you do not comply within 75.3 seconds, you will be destroyed. Cease your movement and prepare to be disarmed." Tovrin stood dumbfounded, then smiled. Up here in the void, indeed, is everything. Yet you realize it is quite empty. Beautiful, but empty. Now it is not because it is a void, no. It is because beyond that is a vast, endless expanse of everything. Your friends, your family, everyone you've ever known is below you. And so you look at that pale blue dot, so small below you, and you come to one conclusion. You must spread it, and then one more, for you are humanity. You must spread it to others. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and patrons. Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Lord Azrakal, Dragzoon WRE, Holly Sister, Ambrose Cattell, and Quantum Wednesday. Thank you very much.